And the results have been predictable. Millions of poor people of color have been rounded up for relatively minor nonviolent drug offenses. In fact, in 2005, 4 out of 5 drug arrests were for possession. Only 1 out of 5 were for sales. Most people in state prison for drug offenses have no history of violence or significant selling activity. And during the 1990s, the period of the greatest expansion of the drug war, nearly 80% of the increase in drug arrests were for marijuana possession, a drug now widely believed to be less harmful than alcohol or tobacco, and at least as prevalent in middle-class and suburban white communities as it is in the ghetto.
Michelle Alexander.
President Clinton.
Yes, I just wanted to bring it up to President Obama because this piece you wrote, very interesting, at TomDispatch.com, called The Age of Obama as Racial Nightmare. Explain.
Yes, well, you know, today, people around the globe, people of color in particular, have been celebrating the election of Barack Obama as kind of our nation's triumph over race and the history of racial caste in America. Yet the appearance of racial equality, the superficial appearance of racial equality that Barack Obama's election has afforded, serves to mask a deeply disturbing underlying racial reality, which is that large segments, you know, a majority of African American men in some urban areas are either under the control of the criminal justice system or branded felons for life, locked in a permanent second-class status. This vast new racial undercaste, and I say caste, not class, because this is a population which is locked into an inferior status by law and by policy. This vast population has been rendered largely invisible through affirmative action and the appearance of success, with, you know, a handful of African Americans doing well in universities and corporations, the sprinkling of people of color through elite institutions in the United States due to affirmative action policies and the limited progress of middle class and upper middle class African Americans creates the illusion of great progress and helps to mask the underlying racial reality, which is that a racial caste system has been reborn in the United States. Young men of color in particular are labeled as felons, labeled as criminals at very young ages, often before they even reach voting age, before they turn 18. Their backpacks are searched, they're frisked on their way to school, while standing, waiting for the school bus to arrive. Once they learn to drive, their cars are searched, often dismantled in a search for drugs. The drug war waged in these poor communities of color has created generations of black and brown people who have been branded felons and relegated to a permanent second-class status for life. And the reason for their excommunication from our society, our mainstream society, is for engaging in precisely the same kind of drug activity that is largely ignored in middle-class and upper-middle-class white communities. People often say to me, well, if you know, black and brown men don't want to be labeled felons, well, then they just shouldn't commit drug crimes. But, you know, we have known as a nation for a long time now that simply prohibiting drug activity does not lead people to stop using illegal drugs. We learned that lesson with alcohol prohibition. Banning the use of alcohol didn't discourage many people from using or selling alcohol. And people of color are no more likely to use or sell illegal drugs than whites. Our stereotype of a drug dealer in the United States is of an African-American kid standing on a street corner with his pants hanging down. But the reality is that drug dealing happens everywhere in America. Drug markets in the United States, much like our society generally, is relatively segregated by race.
We're going to have to leave it there for part one of this interview,
whites
Michelle Alexander, but we're going to ask you to stay after for part two, which will play on Democracy Now! Michelle Alexander, her new book is called The New Jim Crow, Mass Incarceration in the Age of Colorblindness. That does it for our show. Check our job listings at democracynow.org. Online outreach and communications manager open. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez. Thanks for joining us.